Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. Petals were scattered across the living room floor, red, pink, and white, like a strange, silent welcome. They'd been laid out in some attempt at romance, but it wasn't for me. And yet, here I stood, at 7:15 in the evening, on a day that had already felt too long, staring at a sight that twisted my stomach in knots. My first thought was that I should sweep them up, as if clearing away the evidence would make me feel less of a fool. But I didn't move. I just listened to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of that clock on the wall. That clock and we'd developed a tense relationship. It reminded me how little time there is, how quickly trust can be eroded, how quiet a home can get when everything you believed in starts to crack. I remember a day, years ago, when I first realized that time was never really on my side. It was before Rebecca and I were married, before kids, before we signed our names on a mortgage. She was late to a simple dinner date, and I sat by a candle's flickering light, feeling the minutes stretch into hours. I shrugged it off at the time. She was caught in traffic, or she got held up at work. But some part of me recognized a subtle truth, that if someone values you, they don't let hours pass without an explanation. That was a small sign, a petal on the path that would eventually lead me to this moment. Eyes on the petals meant for Ethan Walker, the wedding planner. I exhaled slowly, felt my breath catch in my throat. In the quiet of that living room, I remembered rummaging through the garage earlier, searching for a flathead screwdriver, and stumbling upon a hidden camera. The memory was still raw, unprocessed. I'd found this small device tucked away behind a box of old baseball trophies. I'm not even sure how it ended up in the garage in the first place, but it was there, along with hours of recorded footage. She must have forgotten it was rolling or assumed it was off. Mistakes like that, tiny oversights, are how illusions crumble. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of the daze. The screen lit up with a reminder about some trivial task at work. The time read 7:16 p.m. Only a minute had passed since I first saw the Petals, but it felt like an eternity. I felt my pulse pounding in my temples. I couldn't help but see a swirl of images in my mind. Rebecca's face as she leaned in, arms around him. Ethan, with that confident smirk, the man who was supposed to be planning our anniversary party, ironically enough. I'd seen the video just once, and that was enough to burn it into my memory. "Michael?" A soft voice called from the doorway. I turned, startled to see my wife, my almost stranger, standing there. She looked at me, then the Petals, then back at me. Her eyebrows arched in silent question, but there was no immediate explanation from her lips. For a brief second, she seemed stunned to find me in this state, shoulders slumped, one hand gripping the envelope with those DNA results I hadn't yet revealed to her. Or maybe she already knew. I wanted to speak, but words refused to come. Instead, I let her see the envelope, let the significance of it settle between us. She said nothing. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, and the color drained from her cheeks. If there was a script for what to say in this situation, neither of us had it. We stood there, locked in this moment, until the refrigerator's low hum and that damned ticking clock cut through the silence like a dull blade. I thought back to the Petals again. Why scatter them? Because it's supposed to be romantic. Because it's a gesture of excitement. She probably planned everything meticulously for him, not expecting me to come home early. Maybe Ethan was due any minute, but he wasn't here yet, or else I would have walked in on something far more visceral. That reminder made me swallow hard. The quiet intensity of my own rage simmered just below the surface, but I refused to show it. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to speak calmly, because in that moment, my pride demanded composure. She opened her mouth, then closed it, uncertain. I set the envelope down on the kitchen table. "We should talk," I said. My voice came out lower than I expected, a near whisper. She gave a slight nod and stepped forward, only to stop when she realized there was nowhere safe to move. Every inch of our once cozy living room felt booby-trapped with reminders of her transgression. The next few seconds stretched on painfully before she finally managed to speak. "What do you want me to say?" She sounded tired, yet also guarded, like someone who's forced to confront the truth they've been dreading. I looked at her. Time felt like my enemy once again, ticking away with that clock. It was as if we had all the time in the world to ruin each other's lives, but no time left at all to salvage anything. So I asked, "Rebecca, what is fidelity to you?" The question came out sharper than intended, carrying the weight of every suspicion and betrayal. We'd had philosophical discussions before, over coffee, late at night in bed, or sometimes after watching a movie. But now the conversation was laced with the bitterness of reality. She seemed flustered. "Fidelity," she began, then trailed off, eyes darting to the carpet. "I don't know how to explain it right now. It's complicated." "Complicated," I echoed. "So it's complicated to stay faithful to your husband, to the father of your children." That stung her, I could tell. She stepped back, pressing her lips together. The petals on the floor rustled slightly under her feet, an absurd detail that made my heart tighten. "Michael, I never wanted this toe." "You never wanted it to what?" My voice cracked. I was losing my grip on that cold composure. I pictured the moment on the hidden camera, the way she kissed him, the intimate conversation they had afterward about weekend plans. People in love made those kinds of plans, not people who shared a brief fling. And it made my blood run cold. "You planned this? With him?" I gestured vaguely at the Petals. "Were you going to greet him with a glass of wine, maybe slip into something special? Meanwhile, I'm working to keep this family afloat." She closed her eyes, as if bracing herself. "It wasn't about you, Michael. That's exactly the problem." I replied in a hushed tone. "It should have been about us. But you made it about you and him." The entire house felt drenched in the tension we created, as if the walls themselves might buckle under the strain. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, pounding like an urgent warning. Without another word, I turned away from her, away from the living room, and stepped into the kitchen. My hand drifted over the envelope. I knew what it said. A simple line. "You are not the father." That piece of truth felt like the final blow. Discovering she was with him was one thing, but learning that my child, my son, who I'd spent countless nights rocking to sleep, might not be mine. It tore a hole in the center of my chest. I took a shaky breath, recalling how I'd found out. A coworker kept bragging about how these DNA tests were a neat way to trace ancestry. Curiosity got the better of me, and I thought it'd be fun to see if my side of the family had any unique lineage. I ordered kits for all of us, my wife, my kids, and me. We spat into little tubes, mailed them off. Forgot about them. Until earlier today when the results arrived. My daughter's paternity wasn't in question, but my son's results, side by side with mine, told another story. A moment of horrifying clarity. I had been raising a child that might share my wife's eyes, but not a strand of my DNA. "God, I'm such an idiot," I muttered, shuffling through the papers. Rebecca hovered near the kitchen island, arms folded across her chest. I could feel her presence even though I refused to meet her eyes. She said my name quietly, Michael, almost like a plea. But I couldn't look at her. My pride was in shreds, but it was still pride, and I wouldn't let her see me crumble. I felt cold inside, like I'd closed the door on my own heart. Indifference, I thought ironically, is what kills. Betrayal stabs, but indifference twists the knife. I was about to speak again when we both heard a faint knock at the front door. My gaze snapped toward the sound, and I saw her stiffen. For half a heartbeat, everything froze. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, and the sudden awareness of that knock. We both knew who it must be. "Ethan?" I asked softly. She nodded almost imperceptibly, her lips trembling at the corners. I felt a wave of adrenaline surge through me, an urge to fling the door open and confront him, make him answer for everything he'd done. But an unexpected calmness overtook me. I inhaled, exhaled. "Don't," she whispered, stepping forward as if to stop me. I ignored her, crossing the living room, and walking straight to the door. I opened it, and there he was, Ethan Walker, the man I'd once thought was just an amiable wedding planner for our renewal of vows ceremony. What a cruel joke that was. He stood there with a perplexed smile, holding a small box of chocolates, presumably meant for my wife. When he saw me, his expression morphed into confusion, and then something akin to dread. Michael," he stammered. "I thought." "Rebecca said." He trailed off, glancing past me at the scattered petals, and then at her. She was standing by the couch, arms wrapped around her midsection like she was trying to hold herself together. I nodded at the chocolates in his hand. "Those for my wife?" I asked evenly. He looked uncertain how to respond. "Come in," I added, stepping aside. No point lurking on the doorstep. He hesitated, but I think his curiosity or his arrogance got the better of him, because he did walk in. The door, darkness, another space. It felt like we crossed into a different realm, a strange movie scene where everything was about to unravel. I shut the door behind him, imagining a film cut to black. Lights back on. Scene 2, the confrontation. Ethan's eyes danced between me and Rebecca. "This is awkward," he managed with a nervous chuckle. He ran a hand through his hair, and I saw how sure of himself he usually was. A man used to orchestrating big events, controlling details. Now he was cornered in a situation he hadn't planned for. "Awkward," I repeated with a hollow laugh. "We could also call it betrayal. Or adultery. Which do you prefer?" He exhaled, stepping forward, a glimmer of bravado reappearing on his face. "Michael, I'm sorry," he began. "But I care about Rebecca. It just happened. We didn't plan this to hurt you." I glanced at Rebecca, silently questioning if that was true. Her expression was closed off. Unreadable. I turned back to him. "Well, you've certainly succeeded in hurting me anyway," I said. My voice was dangerously low, like a slow-burning fire. "So let's talk about that. What is fidelity to you, Ethan? Another man's wife, just fair game in the name of it just happened?" He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. Eventually, he shrugged in defeat. "It's not that simple." "Sure," I said. "It's never that simple." Then I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I have 2 kids with this woman. At least I thought both were mine. Care to guess which one might be yours?" Rebecca let out a small gasp. I had just exposed the rawest nerve in the room. Ethan's eyes flicked to her, then back to me, his face turning pale. "Wait, what are you saying?" "Are you?" "I'm saying there's a DNA test that shows our son isn't actually mine," I answered, letting the weight of my words settle. "Now, since you and Rebecca have apparently been intimately involved, I have a decent reason to believe you might be the father. Doesn't that complicate your day?" The silence that followed was almost loud in its intensity. Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Rebecca's hands trembled as she brought them to her mouth, stifling a sob. For a second, I wanted to pity both of them, but the iciness in my chest wouldn't allow it. Finally, Ethan found his voice. "I never intended." "You never intended," I echoed in a soft snarl, cutting him off. "People like you never do. You see a door slightly ajar, and you slide in, enjoying all the privileges without a thought for the destruction left behind. My home is not your playground. My wife is not your toy. Yet here we are." I could feel the room spinning with tension. It was so thick I could choke on it. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again in my pocket. Perfect timing. Everyone stared at me while I silenced it. For a second, I almost wanted to laugh at the absurdity. My phone chirping in the midst of this cinematic meltdown. I looked back and forth between them. "I'm going to give you 2 a moment," I said with forced civility, "because I need a drink." Without waiting for a reply, I strode into the kitchen, leaving them in the living room with the scattered petals. I wondered if they'd talk, if they'd console each other, or if Rebecca would chase after me. In the kitchen, I grabbed a glass and filled it with water from the tap. My throat felt tight and dry. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window above the sink. Eyes sunken, hair rumpled, shoulders tense. I looked like I'd aged 10 years in the span of 10 minutes. I took a long gulp, letting the cool water soothe the dryness, then set the glass down. A memory bubbled up. Our wedding day. She wore a satin gown, her auburn hair pinned up elegantly, a shy smile on her lips. Time was our enemy even then. I recalled fidgeting nervously, worried about the future, but so determined to make it work. Foolish optimism, I suppose. Eventually, I heard low voices behind me, a hushed conversation between them. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but I also couldn't help letting a few words trickle into my consciousness. I heard Rebecca say, "He knows about the test," and Ethan responding with something about, "We have to talk this through." Their voices rose and fell, overlapping in tension. I stared at the clock on the microwave. 7:24 p.m., barely a quarter hour had passed since I'd walked in on the Petals. Time was mocking me. My mind drifted to the hidden camera. I'd found it in the garage, rummaged through the footage, discovered more than I ever wanted to see. They'd used my house, my bed, for at least one of their encounters. She told him how the kids wouldn't be home that day, how I was busy at work. The video was explicit enough that I nearly vomited after seeing it. When I confronted the screen, I felt a sharp, white-hot spear of hatred. Then, something worse, an overwhelming sense of loneliness. Betrayal is ugly, but the emptiness that follows is a void no anger can fill. I recalled my own father leaving when I was 12, how I swore I'd never put my future children through that. Yet, ironically, I was on the verge of making the same choice, or at least, that's what it felt like. The difference was that my father left because he fell out of love. I was considering leaving because love was ripped out from under me. Is it the same thing? Maybe betrayal is just a more spectacular form of falling out of love. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Ethan. I was surprised he had the nerve to approach me one-on-one. He hesitated in the doorway, then rubbed the back of his neck. "Michael, listen, I don't want to be enemies here," I scoffed. "Well, you made that a bit difficult." He nodded, wincing. "I get that, but I do care about Rebecca. And if the boy is mine, I don't know if you want me involved, or if you want me gone. But we can sort it out like adults." I stared at him, wrestling with conflicting emotions. A million instincts clashed in my head, telling me to punch him, to kick him out, to do something drastic. But all that surfaced was a hollow laughter. "Sort it out like adults," I repeated. "Did you think about any of this before you slept with her?" He looked away, ashamed. "No," I continued, "because it was exciting, wasn't it? An affair is thrilling until someone finds out. Then it's all tears and apologies." He didn't respond, perhaps because I was right. Instead, he ran a hand over his face, looking more exhausted than anything else. It dawned on me how his face seemed older under the harsh kitchen light. Perhaps the stress was catching up with him too. Rebecca appeared in the archway, her eyes rimmed red. "Michael," she said, voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Sorry you got caught, or sorry you betrayed me." I asked coldly. She swallowed, stepping closer. I caught a hint of her perfume, once my favorite scent. Now it nauseated me. "Sorry for everything," she managed. "Ethan and I never planned for it to go this far. It was an emotional connection at first, and then it—" "Stop," I said, raising a hand. "I don't want a play-by-play of how you fell in love with him. It doesn't matter. You broke us, Rebecca." I tapped the envelope. "And if you're expecting me to say we can fix this, then you're more naive than I thought." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe I should go," he murmured. Give you two space to talk. I nodded. Yes, that would be best. My tone left no room for negotiation. He set the box of chocolates on the counter, as if that was some sort of peace offering, and walked out. Rebecca moved to follow him, but she paused in the living room, glancing back at me over her shoulder. The tension was unbearable. Then the door closed behind him, and it was just the two of us again. Her shoulders slumped. She looked small and fragile, a far cry from the confident woman I used to admire. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But the coldness in my chest prevailed. "Michael," she whispered, "can we please sit down?" I gave a stiff nod, and we made our way to the kitchen table. The petals on the living room floor remained scattered, an obscene reminder of her intended night with him. We sat across from each other, the overhead light casting harsh shadows on her face. For a moment, I thought about how time had changed her features, fine lines near her eyes, subtle hints of worry in her brow. But it was the changes to her character that hurt more. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she said, voice brittle. "I was going to tell you after the anniversary, or I was going to end it with Ethan. I don't even know. I kept putting it off. That's the funny thing about secrets," I said, leaning forward. "They don't just go away because you ignore them. They fester until they explode in your face." She bowed her head, and I could see tears sliding down her cheeks. "You have every right to hate me." "Oh, I don't hate you," I said coolly. "Hate is passion. I'm just done." It scared me how final that word felt on my tongue. We had a decade of marriage behind us. We had 2 kids, or at least 1.5. It wasn't something I could just dismiss. But betrayal kills a part of you that never comes back. "Michael," she whispered, "I still love you." The hypocrisy stung. I looked at her with disbelief. "Rebecca, you loved me so much that you slept with another man for, what, a year? 2? I don't even know the timeline." "I'm not sure it matters." She burst into sobs. But they were delicate, subdued. This was not the loud wailing of a regretful woman. This was the quiet heartbreak of someone who realized too late that they'd destroyed something precious. Maybe she was more indifferent to me than I'd ever suspected. Maybe it took an affair to jolt her into understanding. But my sympathy was gone. We spent the next hour in conversation that looped around the same points. Her regret, my anger, her confusion, my sense of betrayal. She tried to explain how time wore down our spark, how she felt lonely in the marriage, how Ethan stepped in at just the right moment with his charm and attentiveness. I listened silently, half nodding, half disgusted. Then she admitted she wasn't entirely sure if our son was Ethan's, but the timing suggested he might be. We'd need a more thorough paternity test to confirm. Another blow. Another piece of me chipped away. At some point, the exhaustion overcame me, and I stood up. "I'm going to bed," I said. "I don't expect you to follow me there. Sleep wherever you want. Tomorrow." I paused, feeling the finality in the air. I might not be here. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I left her at the table, the overhead light casting her shadow on the wall, making her look like a ghost of the woman she once was. As I made my way upstairs, I felt that emptiness again, worse than anger, worse than sadness. A numb, hollow ache that said everything was broken, and I was drifting through the wreckage. Morning arrived too quickly. I tossed and turned all night, haunted by flashes of the camera footage in my mind, the crumpled petals, the envelope on the table. I woke up with a dull headache and a raw ache in my chest. The house was eerily quiet. I wondered if she'd slept downstairs, or if she left entirely. Part of me didn't care. After a quick shower, I pulled on jeans and a clean shirt, then headed downstairs. She was in the living room, picking up the petals. The sight of her doing that chore stung, like a final admission that the fantasy was over. She didn't look at me as I passed by, but I felt the heaviness in the air. I made coffee, poured myself a mug, and ignored her presence until she finally spoke. "Michael," she said, voice scratchy from crying. What are we going to tell the kids? I sipped the coffee, not meeting her gaze. They'll be home from my sister's tomorrow. We have one day to decide. My sister often took them for the weekend, a chance for them to spend time with their cousins. I used to think it was a good tradition. Now, it felt like a small mercy that they hadn't been here to see us unravel. She hugged her arms around herself. Are you leaving? I shrugged. I wrote a complaint to the district committee, ironically. In my delirium last night, I typed up "wife is lying" and emailed it to some local bureaucratic office. Don't ask me why. It was a stupid impulse. But it felt like I had to do something, declare something. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Pointless, right? But it was mine to claim, at least for a moment. She let out a shaky exhale. Please don't do anything rash. Rash. I repeated. This entire situation is rash, Rebecca. You married me. Had kids with me. Except maybe one isn't mine. You had a year-long affair, if not longer. You planned a romantic evening, with Petals on the floor, for him. And you asked me not to be rash. She closed her eyes, tears threatening once more. I'm sorry. That word is worthless now, I said, draining the coffee in one gulp. It burned my throat. I'm meeting with a lawyer this afternoon. I need to figure out next steps. Maybe we can handle this amicably. Maybe not. Either way, you'll get my decision soon. Her lips quivered, but she stayed quiet. Time was my enemy once again. With each tick of the clock, I felt my sanity slip further. So I left the house before I could see her collapse into tears and drove aimlessly around the neighborhood. I ended up at a small park, pulled in, killed the engine, and just sat there, staring at the empty swing sets and patches of grass. My father used to take me to a park like this when I was a kid. Now, I was a father in name only, perhaps with a son that might not even be mine. The injustice of it all made me want to scream. But I just sat in the car, quiet, cold. Indifference, or a shield. I couldn't tell which. Eventually, I made a call to the lawyer, an old friend from college named Doug. He agreed to see me that afternoon. After we hung up, I scrolled through my texts, seeing messages from coworkers, from my sister, from the credit card company. Life went on, oblivious to my personal meltdown. I thought about time once more, how it never stops, never shows mercy. By late afternoon, I was back at the house. The living room no longer had petals scattered around. Rebecca was nowhere to be found. I assumed she was holed up in the bedroom or out meeting Ethan in some desperate attempt to figure out their future. Part of me was relieved to have the place to myself. I paced around, noticing the faint scent of cleaning supplies. She must have tried to erase the remnants of her betrayal, as if bleach and a mop could wipe away something that deep. I paused by the kitchen table, recalling how we'd sat there the night before, raw and exposed. The DNA test envelope was still on the counter, along with the box of chocolates Ethan had left. I picked up the box, turned it over in my hands, and dropped it in the trash. Then I stared at the envelope. My name and address typed neatly on the front. The final line inside reading, "You're not the father." I nearly tore it up, but a thought struck me. If I wanted legal clarity, I needed all the proof I could get. So I put the envelope in a manila folder and tucked it into my briefcase. My heart pounded with the weight of that knowledge. The next time I looked at my son, how would I feel? Could I be angry at him when he had no say in any of this? No, he was an innocent piece of collateral damage, just like I was. A wave of bitter exhaustion crashed over me. I sank onto the couch, covering my face with my hands. And in the midst of that silent meltdown, I recalled a specific memory, one more painful than any other. The day my mother told me Dad wasn't coming back. I was 12, tears streaming down her face. She said he'd found someone else. That love wasn't always forever. I promised myself then I'd never be that man. Now, decades later, I felt the humiliating paradox. I had done everything to be loyal, yet I was on the verge of walking away too. As the evening wore on, Rebecca finally emerged. She looked haggard, eyes rimmed red. "I stepped out to think," she said, voice hoarse. "I took a drive. Called my brother. Didn't say much, just needed someone to hear my voice and remind me I'm alive." She paused, then asked, "Did you see your lawyer?" I nodded. "Yes, Doug. He's sorting through the options. I might need a paternity test for our son, something more conclusive." She winced. "I understand." Silence followed. Then, as if we both suddenly remembered we were hungry, we ended up rummaging in the kitchen. We moved past each other like ghosts, not speaking. I grabbed a leftover slice of pizza. She poured herself a glass of wine. We stood at the counter, two strangers sharing the same space. The tension was suffocating. Finally, she broke the silence. "Michael, do you still want to renew our vows? That's what we were planning before all of this, or is it completely off the table?" A harsh, humorless laugh escaped me. "Renew our vows? With the wedding planner you slept with? Rebecca, that's not just off the table, it's laughable. You expect me to stand beside you and promise to love and honor you after you tore our marriage to shreds." She blinked back tears. "I know how it sounds." "Do you?" I asked softly, because from where I stand, it sounds downright absurd. We said nothing more about it. The hour crept by. Eventually, she retreated upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I found myself absent-mindedly tapping the table, letting the clocks ticking get under my skin. Time was a relentless force, whittling down every second of my composure. In the quiet, I thought, the worst part is not even the betrayal. It's the indifference, the casual disregard for our life together, the easy dismissal of everything we'd built. She betrayed me because she felt something was missing. But in doing so, she treated me like an afterthought, a piece of furniture in her life. That's what truly hollowed me out. The next day brought the children home. My sister pulled into the driveway, with both kids bounding out of her car. My daughter raced into my arms with a squeal, and my son ambled up with a smile, the one who might not share my DNA. I tried to smile back, tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, even though my chest felt like a lead weight. Rebecca stood by the doorway, arms folded, the tension in her body obvious. My sister, eyes darting between us, must have sensed something was off. She gave me a questioning look, but I only offered a curt nod. Our daughter, all of 7, ran inside, talking about the sleepover and how many marshmallows they roasted. My son, 10, asked if we could go to the park tomorrow. For a moment, I was taken back to the swirl of emotions I felt in that deserted playground parking lot. I put a hand on his shoulder, forced a grin, and said, "Sure, buddy. We'll see." Rebecca fidgeted behind me, uncertain whether to step forward or hold back. My sister raised an eyebrow, but didn't pry. "All right, you guys take care," she said, giving me a brief hug. "Call me if you need anything." Then she was gone, and the 4 of us were alone in the house. 2 children blissfully unaware, 2 parents burdened by secrets. I knelt down, helping the kids with their overnight bags. My daughter chattered away happily, her face glowing. I saw the wariness in my son's eyes, though he sensed tension. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked quietly. That question hit me like a punch in the gut. I managed to nod, ruffled his hair, and sent him off to the living room to watch TV. Time was slicing into me again. How many more quiet afternoons would we have like this? How many more father-son moments would pass untainted by the knowledge that we might not share blood? Rebecca and I tried to act normal around the kids for the rest of the day. We asked them about their weekend. We played a board game. We ordered pizza. But the unspoken tension lingered like a foul odor. Every so often, I caught her looking at me with sorrow in her eyes, as though she might break down any minute. I kept my gaze neutral, my voice polite, my demeanor cold. The children didn't need to see me unravel. That night, after the kids were in bed, I went out to the back porch. Darkness enveloped the yard, the neighbors' lights twinkling in the distance. The air was crisp. I sat on the old bench I'd built from leftover wood scraps. I remembered how proud I was when I first finished it, calling Rebecca out to admire my handiwork. She teased me about the uneven stain, but we laughed, and she kissed my cheek. Another memory to haunt me. Footsteps behind me. She'd followed me out. I stared straight ahead. After a minute, she sat beside me, leaving a few inches of space. We listened to the crickets chirping. Then she spoke, voice almost lost to the night air. "I talked to Ethan earlier," she said. My shoulders tensed, but I said nothing. She continued, "He wants to find a way to fix things, to be there for the child if he's truly the father. But he also said he doesn't want to cause more damage than he already has." I gave a derisive snort. "A bit late for that." She nodded sadly. "Michael, you deserve better than what I did to you." "Don't tell me what I deserve," I replied, voice hard. "I know exactly what I deserved, and you didn't give it to me." A few moments passed in silence. "You're right," she whispered. "Maybe this is beyond repair." I let out a long breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. Then I turned to her, my eyes searching mirrors. "Rebecca, if I leave, it's not because I want to punish you. It's because I can't live like this. I can't pretend we're fine. Not after everything you've done. And not after the tests that say I might not be our son's father." Her bottom lip trembled. "I understand. Do you?" I asked quietly. Then, surprising even myself, I said, "I don't think you do. You broke something so fundamental, I'm not sure you can grasp how deep the cracks go. But if you want to salvage anything, even an ounce of respect between us, then you need to cooperate with whatever legal steps I take." She blinked, tears forming again. "I will. I promise." I stood up from the bench. Staring down at her in the moonlight, I could almost remember a time when I loved her with every fiber of my being. And part of me still did, in that tragic, unkillable way. But that part was overshadowed by the pain, the humiliation, the sense that I'd become a stranger in my own home. "Good night," I muttered. Then I walked inside, leaving her under the stars. Days turned into weeks. We arranged for an official paternity test, and I waited with grim anticipation for the results. Rebecca and I lived in the same house, but barely spoke beyond the logistics of parenting. The children, keen observers, sensed something was off. My daughter asked if we were mad at each other. We lied, said, "No, just stressed from work." My son grew quieter, as though absorbing the tension. Ethan tried calling me a few times. I ignored him, let his messages pile up. He apologized, explained how he didn't mean to cause havoc, how he wanted to do right by everyone. Each voicemail was like a tiny spark that threatened to ignite my temper, so I deleted them without response. I went to work, clocked in, clocked out, tried to focus on project deadlines. My coworkers noticed my distraction, but I gave them little to go on. "Just family stuff," I said. They'd nod sympathetically, perhaps imagining a mild marital spat, never guessing the full scope of the betrayal. At night, I'd come home, have dinner with the family in awkward silence, help the kids with homework, and avoid lingering with Rebecca. Then I'd hide away in my garage workshop, sanding the edges of a half-built cabinet, letting the hum of machinery drown out my thoughts. When I got tired enough, I'd fall into a restless sleep. Finally, the day arrived when the paternity test results came back. An envelope in the mail, ironically similar to the first one. I opened it alone in my car, parked by the mailbox. My hand shook as I scanned the letter. The result was definitive. The probability of paternity was 0. I closed my eyes, feeling that old numbness spread through me again. I went back inside, found Rebecca in the kitchen. She saw my face and froze. I held out the letter. "He's not mine," I said flatly. She turned pale. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Michael, oh God, I'm so sorry." "Save it," I replied, steel in my voice. "I'm calling my lawyer. I want a separation agreement. And you can figure out how to explain this to our son in due time, because he'll find out eventually. But first, I need to decide how to handle it." She collapsed into a chair, silent sobs shuddering through her shoulders. For a moment, I was caught between pity and anger, between heartbreak and that same coldness. Time marched on regardless, unconcerned with my moral crisis. The clock on the wall ticked as steadily as ever. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal consultations and tense conversations. Doug guided me through the labyrinth. If I wanted to remain a father figure to my son, legally, there were ways to do so. But part of me questioned if that was even right for him. For all of us. Ethan wanted to claim paternity rights, which caused yet another layer of chaos. Lawyers on all sides got involved. My house was no longer a refuge. It was a battlefield of custody arguments and property divisions. Rebecca tried to talk to me one evening after the kids were asleep. She hovered in the hallway, tears glistening, and whispered, "Do you still believe in love, Michael?" I stared at her, the woman I once adored. "I believe it's real," I said quietly. "But I also believe it's not indestructible." She nodded, tears falling. "So this is our end." I hesitated, thinking about the line between love and destruction, how easily we cross it. Finally, I said, "Yes, this is our end." And as those words left my mouth, a part of me died. But another part felt a grim sense of relief. Revenge, it turns out, isn't always violent or dramatic. Sometimes, revenge is just the act of removing yourself from someone's life, leaving them to face the consequences of their own actions. I didn't plan some elaborate retribution. I simply signed the paperwork that gave me the house for a time, so the children could have stability, while allowing her to move out. She'd be with Ethan, presumably, or rent a place on her own if that fell through. I couldn't muster the energy to care. On a Saturday morning, I woke up early, hammered a for sale sign into the lawn, and started packing boxes. The kids were with my sister again, so I had the house to myself. My mind flashed back to the complaint I wrote, "Wife is lying," and a wry smile tugged at my lips. Perhaps the district committee, or whoever read it, had a laugh at my strange meltdown. It didn't matter anymore. Let them laugh. Rebecca arrived around noon to pick up some of her clothes and personal items. We barely spoke. She paused at the doorway, looking around at the half-empty living room. I could see the memories dancing in her eyes. Birthday parties, family movie nights, the kids' drawings on the fridge. She walked over to me and held out a folded piece of paper. "This is from me to you," she said softly. "No excuses. Just read it if you want." I didn't take it at first, but then I sighed and reached out. "Sure." She lingered like she wanted to say more, but when I offered no invitation, she left. Door, darkness, another space. The final scene was underway. I tucked the paper in my pocket, not bothering to read it right then. By late evening, I'd made good progress. Boxes were stacked against walls. The furniture was labeled. I slumped onto the couch, our couch, for what might have been the last time. The lights were dim, the house eerily silent. I found myself recalling the day we bought this place, the excitement in her eyes as she talked about color palettes and furniture placement. Now, it felt like a shell. At some point, I remembered the letter in my pocket. I took it out, unfolded it, and read, "Michael, I know I can't ask for forgiveness. I know I've destroyed everything we built. There's a million things I could say, but none of them matter. In the end, I am the one who failed. I fell into something I thought was love, but it was a selfish escape. I lied to you, betrayed you, and took for granted the man you are. You always deserved more. No matter what happens from here, please remember that at one time, we truly did love each other. And I will always carry the guilt of how I ruined that. If you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll be grateful. But I won't ask for that forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm sorry." Rebecca, I read it twice, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. It changed nothing. But maybe in some tiny way, it gave me a glimmer of closure. I set the letter down, exhaled. Then I found a pen and scribbled one word at the bottom. Goodbye. It felt final. On the day we closed the sale of the house, I supervised the movers as they loaded furniture into trucks. My daughter and son stayed with my sister. Soon, I'd move to an apartment nearer my workplace. Rebecca's new address was scribbled on a notepad. She'd take the children every other weekend. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it was an attempt at structure. While we waited for the new owners to finalize papers, I walked through each empty room. The living room, where Petals once lay scattered. The kitchen, where I confronted her with the DNA results. The upstairs bedroom, site of countless happy memories that now felt tainted. I tried to hold on to the best moments. Her laugh, the way she'd wake me with a kiss, the nights we danced in our pajamas. But each memory was overshadowed by betrayal. I lingered by the front door, one last glance at the space that had been my home. Then I stepped outside. Door, darkness, another space. As I walked away, I felt a rush of cold air fill my lungs, and a strange lightness in my chest. It wasn't happiness, exactly, but it was something close to relief. At the curb, I stopped. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving me with my car and a half-dozen boxes. I watched the truck turn the corner, vanish from sight. Maybe that was the symbolic end. I closed my eyes, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. A lawnmower in the distance, a dog barking, kids laughing somewhere down the street. Life went on. Time was still the enemy, but it was also the only remedy left. I'd never be the same man I was before. I'd lost trust, lost illusions, lost a child I'd thought was my flesh and blood. But I was still here, breathing, alive. The world hadn't stopped turning. The clock hadn't stopped ticking. Maybe that was the real punishment, or the real gift. I wasn't sure which. Taking a deep breath, I got in my car, turned the key, and pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back. A new chapter began, fraught with uncertainty, but also freed from the lie that had once defined my life. And in that final moment, a calm voice in my head reminded me, the worst thing is not betrayal. It's indifference. I gripped the steering wheel, the city lights blurring in the windshield. I would not let indifference claim me. Not anymore. I drove on into the dusk, leaving behind the wreckage of a once happy home. And even though my heart felt raw, something in me whispered that I was moving forward, however painfully, however slowly, toward a future where I could learn to breathe again.